Hey, welcome back to Zane Customs. This week I'm going to be sculpting another custom D&D figure for a D&D campaign I've been running. And if you've seen my videos in the past, you'll probably recognize this figure. This is from a fairy that I sculpted probably 2 or 3 months ago. And I was kind of in a rush to get the sculpt done for my D&D campaign, so I just figured it'd be a lot quicker if I could take the body from an old mesh I already had done. And I'm just modifying it a little bit here, but it's basically the same overall shape and everything. So this is another figure from my D&D campaign. If you've seen my previous videos, you'll know that I've done quite a bit of those, and most of them were actual figures based on my players' characters. But one of them I did a while ago was an NPC, and this is another NPC. And basically, these characters are like gods in the fantasy world, and they're all also based off the 12 labors of Hercules. So the first one is named Nemean, after the Nemean lion, and if you've seen that video, you'll know why. Obviously, he's got a giant lion helmet type thing on top of his head, and I kind of want to do a similar thing with the rest of the gods, kind of have a similar aesthetic. So this one, I don't know how to pronounce this. I think it's Lernian, but in Greek myth, basically Hercules does these 12 labors and has to go fight like 12 magical creatures or whatever the labor is, and the Lernian is a hydra. So this one, obviously the girl's name is Lernian or Lernia, I don't know how to pronounce it, but anyway, I wanted to kind of bring that whole hydra ideal over in the design. So just like Nemean, where he had a lion helmet, I wanted her to kind of have a hydra head, kind of like Medusa wanted like snakes coming off the top of her head. And here's an old drawing I did years ago, basically a rough idea of what I wanted her to look like. This D&D campaign we started years and years ago, and kind of recently just been getting back into it. And you know, now I have the abilities to use ZBrush and really high quality printer, so it's pretty fun trying to get back into making all these sculpts. But yeah, like I was saying, basically all I'm doing right now is really just focusing on the helmet, because this is loosely based off that drawing I did. Same with Nemean, who I did months ago. It was based off a drawing, but I'm also just kind of freestyling a lot of the design as I go, because my drawings aren't insanely detailed, especially when you compare them to like a sculpture. Whereas if I turn this drawing into a sculpture exactly, it would be pretty basic. It wouldn't have a lot going on. So a lot of what I do with a lot of these sculpts is just kind of freestyling as I go, or like kind of like sketching, just kind of making things up as I go. And here I'm adding or sculpting out a snake head, again because I want her to have almost a Medusa look with the helmet, so I want snakes at the end of it. And this took me a while, just tweaking the proportions back and forth, and I looked at a lot of pictures of snakes, and snakes have a lot of different shaped heads. Like, I kind of just imagined that one shape would look right for all of them, but going through it, there's tons of different types of shapes. If you have like an anaconda or a boa constrictor, or whatever type of snake you have, they all look different. And from when I was reading, some of them will have bigger jaw or jowls, whatever you want to call it, if they're poisonous and things like that. So I ended up looking at a lot of pictures. For a while there, I felt like it was looking more just like a lizard, but in the end I ended up being pretty happy with it. And here I'm just adding in texture. I want it to look like stone, like her helmet's carved out of stone, so I'm going in and adding in a rough texture and cracks, because I want it to look like old and ancient. And here I'm starting to work on the body for the snake, and I ended up not being happy with this, and I kind of just turned this into some strands of her hair, because I was trying to get an even texture throughout the whole body of the snake. I wanted the scales to run through the whole body and tie it together. I didn't want it to look like there was any weird overlaps or anything, and it just wasn't working out properly. So here you can see I just kind of decided to turn it into hair and adding some hair on the front, but then I'll go back in and create a new mesh and make a new snake body out of that. this was probably my favorite part of the whole process of sculpting this girl. Basically just because I was happy with the way the helmet was going, and it was just exciting to me. And it kind of gave me, as I was doing it, made me think of Spartan helmets. Or I think it's Spartan helmets, the ones that have the broom or like the bristles across the top of the helmet. And this doesn't have bristles coming out or anything. It's just a snake body, but it's kind of going across the top and down the back in the same way, which I thought was cool. I ended up going with a different texture because she's based off the Hydra, so I didn't want it to necessarily just be a snake. Even though the head looks pretty snaky, I want it to be more of a snake, but mythological, you know. And then here, I got the helmet done, and unfortunately I lost some of the video where I finished it up. But it's basically the same thing. I finished that one snake and then duplicated it onto the other two sides, and then textured the helmet like I did the rest of the snake with a rock texture and added cracks and things like that. And this was probably the absolute funnest part of the sculpt, because I learned recently how to use masking, basically like automatic masking. So masking is when I go in, and you'll see it a lot when there's just like a black line will go across the screen and it masks it off just like paint. Like it's like taping something off so it can't be affected. And what I learned recently is you can use an auto mask feature, so you can click like mask by cavity, and everything that's would be a cavity on the sculpt would be inset, gets masked off, and everything else you can still affect, or mask by peaks and valleys and just all these cool things. So it lets you get more of a natural color scheme going across your sculpts, and I absolutely loved it. I think it looks very good. I'm super happy with it. And now, you know, I use auto masking all the time now when it comes to coloring, because it just looks a lot better, which is a problem I always had when it came to coloring of my model, because I could print it out and color it, and I could dry brush it and do all these things, and it'll really help highlight the detail. But digitally coloring it, there wasn't a way to dry brush or add washes or any of these things to really help highlight details. So once I learned how to auto mask, which is basically the digital version of that, it basically changed everything. Makes my models look a lot better. You can actually finally see all the detail that I sculpted in there. And here I'm working on some more of the dynamic cloth system that ZBrush has added recently, and which is basically you add a material or not a mesh, whatever you want to do, and then turn it into a dynamic cloth simulation, and it'll flow and fall like real fabric would. It's a super cool tool, and it's really nice because it's a lot quicker and faster rather than going in and sculpting a piece of cloth that falls realistically on the body. You can just kind of put this in there, click run, and it'll fall basically perfectly. Now here I'm just starting to work on the rest of the body. I spent a long time on that helmet, again, because I was having so much fun with it, and I was super happy with the way it turned out. But now I gotta try to flesh out the rest of the body, and her clothing and everything. And again, this is all loosely based off of that drawing that I did. And that drawing, honestly, is probably 4 years old at this point. It's pretty old, and not hyper detailed or anything, but I still want to roughly base it off that as I move on with the rest of the sculpt. And like I said earlier, I'm gonna add a lot of new details and things that wasn't in the original drawing, but I like to have that just as a kind of like a beginning mark. And this belt thing that I'm adding here doesn't look very good. Almost makes her look pregnant. It makes her stomach stick out a lot. And I wanted the belt to look like it was made out of leather or something thick, but I think it ended up looking too thick and kind of weird. So I do go back in later on and kind of flatten it out and don't make it protrude so much. And now here I'm doing another one of those cloth dynamics, and I was super happy with the way this turned out, because I basically wanted to have like a shawl kind of draping over her shoulders, and you can see that in the original drawing. And again, being able to do the cloth dynamics is so great, because I try to get one video out a week. Every Monday I try to put one of these videos out, and learning stuff like that, or auto masking, or any of the things that I've mentioned in the video just helps it so I can get a good sculpt and do it a lot faster, not have to spend so much time on it. I will say, however, even though I've been learning all these new techniques and helping me move faster through my sculpts and make them look even better, the one thing that I still need to do a lot more work on is faces. Just in general, I'm never super happy with the way a face turns out unless it's not a human face. Or I shouldn't say that, because like I've been doing the Minecraft zombie and the Minecraft pillager recently, and I'm super happy with the way those turned out, because a zombie I can tweak the proportion and it's gonna look good. Might even look better, because zombies might have a broken jaw or something, you know. And then with the pillager, the Minecraft pillagers have a really prominent nose, and I tried to highlight that, so going a little bit more cartoony, less realistic is easier. But I like the more realistic look. That's what I'm trying to do with most of my sculpts. So I think I just need to work a little bit more on that, because I wasn't super happy with the way her face turned out, and like especially when it came to coloring, I couldn't get the right shade, and it just ended up looking kind of weird. So this is masking right here. I'm basically masking off all the seams, or I'm not sure exactly what you call it, but like the end of her fabric that goes to her shoulders or around her neck. So when I add in this surface texturing, it doesn't affect that part, because I want to have a different texture on there, or a different color, or whatever. And then the great thing is, like after I add in all these great details, I can go in and do my auto masking, so it'll mask the top of the fabric, and then I can use a darker color to shade in underneath it, and just makes the fabric texture really pop. And when I was originally thinking about sculpting this figure up, or when I was drawing it back in the day, I was imagining her having a lot lighter clothes, like basically all white and then some light browns in there. But after going in and being able to experiment with a lot of different things in ZBrush, I thought this kind of reflective material that almost looks like scales worked really well, especially because, again, she's based off the Hydra, which isn't a real creature, but is kind of similar to a snake, or at least in my head it is. So that basically just allowed me to carry over more detail, and have more of an homage to the Hydra. Mask off the parts of the body, the seams, like I was saying earlier, are still that basic gray that they originally were, and now I can go basically mask off everything else, and now I can color those how I want them to look. And then I decided here to change the color from green, because even though the Hydra might be green, I'm not sure in Greek mythology if they ever say what color it is. The helmet was stone, and I thought it matched a lot better, having kind of a more gray tones throughout the body. The green kind of popped out to me, and I think this blends a lot better with her whole costume. And one thing I try to do when I sculpt these figures is, like I said, this and Nemean, the dude with the lion head that I sculpted a couple months back, they're basically part of a pantheon of gods, so I want them to have a similar aesthetic. So like the helmets is one thing that carries over. The next god that I'll sculpt from this D&D campaign will also have a helmet like that. That's kind of something that carries over between all of them. But also, aside from that, I want their clothes to look somewhat similar. You know, I don't want to have zippers or something, because this is a fantasy world, but it's it's more high fantasy, so not something that you would actually see in like the Middle Ages. I don't want it to be based off that. I want it to be more high fantasy, Lord of the Rings, something like that. So there is obviously a lot of design choices I do that wouldn't be realistic because I'm going for more of a high fantasy kind of classic D&D look, but I still try to have somewhat similar looks between all my D&D figures, because again, these are all part of the same campaign, and if someone showed up with a lightsaber, it wouldn't make any sense. Not to say that won't happen. I have some really cool ideas for this campaign, so you might see me sculpt some future characters that don't really fit with the rest of the characters I have done, but I'll have good reasons for it and it'll make sense. But all these characters, I want all of them to have a very, very similar look. And one thing that's fun about sculpting these, when I sculpted those D&D figures, I mentioned this in the videos where I actually sculpted them. I sculpted all of those original ones years ago, or maybe a year, maybe 2 years ago. Not too long ago, but long in the sense that I now have ZBrush and a lot of other things, and I've gotten way better. So when I came back to them, all those videos are basically me starting with my original sculpt and upgrading it. And this one, I never sculpted back in the day, so it's just basically a brand new sculpt. And it's kind of crazy because I went back in and redid, let's say, Nemean, again, the dude with the lion helm, and I was super happy with the way it turned out. And now, just a couple weeks later, I'm sculpting Lernian, again, I don't know how to pronounce that, that's what I'm going to say, and she looks a million times better than Nemean does, in my opinion. I think they're comparable, they stand decently well together. It's not like he's a cartoon or she's realistic or anything like that, but I think she looks way better than he does, and that's just from me, my skill getting better, me learning more about ZBrush and learning different techniques, and like I said, auto masking and surface mesh or surface texturing, things like that, and it's really helped make these sculpts look better. So I'm not going to do this, but I already thought it'd be fun to go back in and resculpt them again. One of my very early sculpts I did on this channel was the Ender Dragon, and going back and looking at it, and that sculpture is not nearly as good as something I could do now, so I kind of want to go back in and redo it. And I'm not going to do that because then I'd just be caught in basically an infinite loop of going back and forth and fixing stuff up. But I think after maybe a year or so of doing YouTube, I might go back to some early on videos I did and kind of remake them, because I think I could do a lot better job with the sculptures, and I might even go back and redo some of these D&D ones. So yeah, like I was saying, I wasn't super happy with the way the face turned out. I just feel like she looks a little manly or rough. I don't know, something about it. I wanted this character is friendly, and I didn't want her to look threatening or anything. So I tried to soften the smile and things like that, but I don't know, something about it just didn't end up looking good, and the skin I think looks terrible. I ended up using a material called Skin Shade, which you think would look good, but I think I just had the wrong color on it, and she just looks like washed out, and it didn't end up looking very good. But again, that's something that I could always go back in later and fix. I was kind of on a time constraint with this one because the way our D&D campaign goes, they're basically going through like a trial to meet the gods, and if you complete this trial, then you can go to the gods and ask them a question or get a boon, whatever. And like I said, Nemean and this girl are one of the gods. So there's 12 gods based off, again, the 12 labors of Hercules, and so there's 12 trials. And basically the idea was originally for these sculpts is after they complete one trial, one of the players will get a statue based on that god, whoever did the best in the trial. So the first god was Nemean, and he's the god of war, so their first challenge was basically playing chess. A little bit more involved than that. Basically that was the whole idea, and whoever did the best, and I ended up giving them a statue that I sculpted of Nemean. So we had another D&D play session coming up, so I had to real quick sculpt this character and print it out for that play session, and I'm pretty much happy with all of it. Again, the face is the only thing that I wasn't super thrilled with, but I can always go back in later and fix that up. But majority of it, I ended up being fine with the way it looked. And I shouldn't say that. I wasn't fine with the way it looked. I was really, really happy with the way it looked. Thrilled even. And here I'm just trying to add some wraps kind of around her arm like she had in the picture or my early drawing. But I ended up not liking the way it was looking and getting rid of it. Even though I've been learning a lot new techniques like this cloth dynamics and stuff, I still don't know everything about it, so sometimes I can't get it to work properly. But it wasn't a big deal. It was just kind of a last minute detail that I thought I could throw in, but I was happy with the way it had, the whole sculpt had already been going, so I was fine to cut that part out. And then all I really have to do now is add a base, and then I'm pretty much done. And here is the perfect example of how auto masking helps you color something. You'll see as I mask it, it'll mask the cracks or everything but the cracks or something like that. Then I can go in and add color, and it's so nice because before when I'd get to the coloring stage, everything would look kind of flat, wouldn't look so good, and a lot of the detail I added into the sculpt wouldn't really show up. But being able to do this makes everything look a lot better. That's the finished sculpt right there. I'll just throw some high-res photos up so you guys can take a look. Again, I'm super happy with the way it turned out. Even the face, it's not terrible. I'm not thrilled with it, but majority of the sculpt overall, I'm super happy with the way it turned out. So I also want to say thanks so much for watching. Super appreciate it. You can check out my Instagram and my Etsy if you're interested. Anything you see me sculpt on here, you can buy off my Etsy. And those are both called Zane Customs as well, and I'll have links in the description if you want to check those out. But yeah, I mostly just want to say thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next week.